Hello, and welcome to the lore of Braunhaven. Today we're going to continue to look at the Borderlands. We're going to look at the Kingdom of Beiria. So the Kingdom of Beiria can pretty much count its borders from just south of the Eastern Tradeway, from about the Gloucester Inn, to just north of the small town of Athelsberg. This is really not an ideal area. The northern part of the Kingdom of Beiria is actually quite lush. You have a lot of farmlands, sweeping grassy fields, a few good woods, including the Dallin Wood. But the southern portion, or at least the southeastern portion of the Kingdom of Beiria, is the northern regions of the Gloaming Marshlands, which is a dense, muddy bog that is rife with lizard folk, and there are rumors that these lizard folk are uh, led by, I don't know if "led" is the right word. They venerate uh, an ancient black dragon, but nobody has seen this black dragon for eons. So um, whether that is true or not, nobody is sure. Nobody, as of yet, has actually found the dragon's lair, although that can't be confirmed either because nobody that has been sent to try to find the dragon's lair has ever returned. The assumption, of course, is that the lizard folk got them and they were set upon in these terrible marshlands. But travel through the northern region or any region of the gloaming marshlands is difficult at best. Uh, it travel is slow. The terrain is terrible. It's just not a great place. And the worst part about the Kingdom of Beiria is that it was really an afterthought. So the three knights that came with their armies from the Gaulian Empire in order to secure the borderlands at that time, way back when, the borderlands were considered a important area because it was a strategic stopgap to prevent the the gnolls from the southeast from coming in, and so it was really the eastern marches back then. And these three knights, after securing the area, these three knights set up their own kingdoms, and they drew straws, I suppose. They drew lots, and the first one, of course, took the kingdom of Cassex all the way to the south, and which was probably the best area, um, without a doubt. They established the port city of London, and and this is prime real estate. The second lot took the kingdom of Kaling and founded uh, the town of Cockenford, and of course Cockenford Abbey. And probably, I would say that Kaling is likely the kingdom of Kaling, or at least the knight that founded it, was probably um, the most adamant follower of Saint Gloucester, leading to Cockenford Abbey, and the integration of the small population of Dragonborn that lived in the Drakon Mountains. The odd man out, who drew the third lot, uh, ended up choosing the Kingdom of Beiria. And Beiria, like I said, the northern part, there's some very, very rich farmland in the northern regions. The southern regions, or at least the southeastern regions, a third of it is or half of the southern regions, is just this terrible marsh. That, of course, led to them being required to. That's where they built their fortress, which turned into the small city of Shiraborn. Shiraborn is pretty much built on the most solid edges of the northwestern end of the gloaming marshland. And of course that has led to some internal jokes about, you know, the first fortress sank into the swamp, the second fortress burned down and then sank into the swamp, but the third one stayed up. Sherborne, they have a very strange lineage of rulership. So the knight that founded the Kingdom of Beiria was of very noble birth. Now, of course, nobility isn't always a requirement for knighthood. But these three that were sent, of course, this was following St. Glaus' victory over Faunestein. And so, of course, these three knights were all of noble lineage. They had all been titled. They were all granted lands in the Eastern Marches, which later became the Borderlands. And so they all have their own varying degrees. But the knight that took Kingdom of Beiria wasn't just granted titles. He was of some kind of noble lineage before that. Not that there was a whole lot of noble lineage before that, because uh, Gloucester hadn't really founded the empire yet, and so the what his noble lineage was probably dated back to when the area was ruled by barbarian tribes or something of that nature. But he had a whole bunch of baggage that came with his lineage, and there was a desire to keep that lineage pure, keep the blue blood in the blue. And this, of course, which happens to many kingdoms, led to great amounts of interbreeding. This knight was, as soon as the Kingdom of Beiria was formed, and he had built uh, his castle, and the town or city, well, at that time it was just a small town, was established. He then sent for his sister and her family, and he ended up marrying his niece. This was followed by a series of interfamily marriages. Um, Niece, nephew, first cousins. In one case, there was a literal case of a brother and sister marrying. And that was, I mean, this is not abnormal. I mean, in the real world, you can look at the Habsburgs as a great example of what happens when that when that is done. But almost every royal bloodline, this has been done. If you just looking at Europe, even in the modern day, um, you can look at a king of Germany standing next to an English prince or English king, and they look like they could be twins. Well, that's because it almost is true. Their genetic their genetic line is not that far apart. In fact, doing a DNA test on them, their lines are close enough that you might at first believe you're looking at two tests of the same individual. So this is not abnormal. And the Kingdom of Beiria kind of fell, not necessarily fell. They're still there, but they fell victim to their own internal marriages. And Today, the Kingdom of Beiria technically has a king, and except that he he is not capable of really sitting on the throne. So it was determined long about the age of 4 or 5 that he had some rather um, crippling disabilities, both mental and physical. He has a twisted club foot, requiring him to either walk around on crutches or be pushed around in a wheelchair. Add to that, he has um, not possibly not one but multiple mental disorders, um, along the lines of severe um, Down syndrome, or mixed with autism and a number of he's not capable, just period. His mother has taken the throne as the queen regent of the Kingdom of Beiria. Now, of course, she's not. Um, sh His mother is quite ambitious, and she is not entirely thrilled with the city of Sherborne, because who would be? I mean, a lot of people would say, give me a kingdom and I'll be happy. But her kingdom, or at least the capital of her kingdom, sits on the edge of a swamp, and so in her eyes, life could be better. And she is quite ambitious to the point of um, self-righteous selfishness. That it's not necessarily that the people are treated poorly, but she is definitely out for herself, and she is not really looking to the day uh, when her son would be able to take the throne. And luckily for her, that day is unlikely to ever come. Um, this is one of those cases of, in game mechanics terms, people might say, well, what about a cleric casting a healing spell or a restoration spell? He was born this way. A restoration spell, especially, would assume that you're restoring something to its factory default settings. His factory default setting is autistic Down syndrome with a twisted club foot. So that the restoration spell is not going to heal him. A heal spell, he's not. I mean, he has a lot of health issues, but they're all. He was born that way. They're all natural. The healing spell again is trying to set things back to the way they were. There's no fixing him. He's going to be this way, and that's pretty much that. And so she has resigned herself to this this lifestyle. And like I said, she's quite ambitious. It leads to her having border issues with both the Kingdom of Kaling and the Kingdom of Casix, pushing in either direction. She's smart enough that she doesn't do it too much, because Sherborne was placed because that is where the lizard folk are living, and its entire purpose of being there is to stop them. Sherborne is the wall in the swamp. You do not cross this line, and so Sherborne itself is constantly having to deal with these lizard folk. There are some years where the lizard folk don't do anything. They sit in their swamp doing what lizard folk do. There are other years where they get riled up for who knows what reason, and their forces will march on Sherborne. Sometimes their forces will attempt to bypass Sherborne, marching south, and in those cases, a lot of times, they the Kingdom of Beiria has had buddy team ups with the Kingdom of Casix in order to put down a large amount of these lizard folk. But at the end of the day, the Queen Regent is not dumb enough to try to fight a front on, or fight multiple fronts. And obviously the issues with the lizard folk and their just vast numbers are going to really keep her from moving north on the Kingdom of Kaling, leaving, you know, hundreds of thousands of lizard folk at her rear. And of course, the Kingdom of Beiria, even if the lizard folk weren't an issue, the Kingdom of Beiria is going to have a hard time battling the Kingdom of Casix. The Kingdom of Casix just simply has the larger numbers, and they have access to mercenaries. So Sherborne just kind of sits there. There are some minor border skirmishes. There are land issues, arguments over, which farm or village is paying their tithes to who, and this has led to anything from harsh words being spoken and terse arguments to open skirmishing and the loss of some lives. A lot of these issues, especially to the south, are part of logging rights for the Shallwood Forest. Of course, the forest itself of the large bulk of it belongs to the Kingdom of Beiria, but there is a southern portion of the Shallwood Forest that is considered to be a part of the Kingdom of Casix and is the uh, royal hunting grounds for the Kingdom of Casix. And so there has been unfortunate incidents that happen in the forest, and usually those are, a run and gun kind of situation, guerrilla tactics. They One group sets upon the other unbeknownst and leaves a slaughter behind. Other times, when there has been large conflicts, the elves of Shallwood Forest put an end to both sides and go about their day. But the Kingdom of Beiria, like I said, I don't know that I would necessarily say that the Kingdom of Beiria is evil. I mean, if it is, it would definitely be along the lines of neutral evil. And that's not to say that every person that lives in Beiria is an evil person. But the people will take on a large for the larger part, a majority of the people will take on the similar alignment of who is ruling them. And I would definitely say that the Queen Regent is a neutral evil person for the most part. I guess if you're playing this in old school essentials, she would definitely be neutral, but heavily leaning towards selfish input. She's looking out for number one. In fact, I wouldn't even say necessarily that as a queen, she's not really doing her duty of looking out for her people. She looks out for her people as long as it maintains her comfort and her rulership. For the most part, that has benefited the people of the Kingdom of Beiria. But truth be told, the real person that is benefiting the most is, of course, the Queen Regent. Uh, the king, her son, he's fairly young. He would have just recently turned 16. He is very rarely seen by the people. He doesn't leave the castle very often. And honestly, even when there are courtly events that are held at Sherborne, or diplomatic groups that come from any of the other kingdoms or from abroad, um, he's not really seen much. He's not even seen at court. Very, very rarely he'll make an appearance. He is a rather tragic figure that really has been In an ironic sense, he's been robbed of his birthright by his birthright. Uh, he is who he is, and unfortunately, that's never going to change for him. And so the Kingdom of Beiria, um, they have their issues. I wouldn't say that the Kingdom of Beiria is necessarily the richest. Uh, there's nothing to mine around the gloaming marshlands. There's very few ore deposits. They do get they are really a breadbasket for the borderlands. And so they do have a large economy based on selling their grain and produce, and of course, meat from livestock to the other two kingdoms, and traded, elsewhere. But um, that that of course leads to the Queen Regent taxing her own people who own those farmlands at a higher percentage because they can afford it. Um, that they're not the farmers are not poor. None of the farmers, I would say, are necessarily poor in the borderlands, but they're probably worse off in the Kingdom of Beiria simply because the Queen Regent is constantly taking and taking and taking. So that is the Kingdom of Beiria. Next time we will talk about the Kingdom of Casix and the gloriousness that is Casix. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.